we can see what you think. The first phase, when you're doing creative problem solving, is the honeymoon phase. You have your idea. I wake up in the middle of the night, I have an idea for my artwork, it's genius. I love this idea. I've got 100 things worked out in my mind, I can't wait to get up tomorrow morning. If I'm in a business group and we are brainstorming, once the group gets super excited about one idea, we're stoked. We can't believe this is going to be great. This is going to change everything. So this idea feels perfect because it's an abstraction. It's tall, it's handsome, it has a great job, it laughs at all your jokes, it likes your mother. You're crazy about this idea. This idea could be the one. This is how the universe pushes you forward. It's the rose-colored glasses. It's so exciting. You can't wait. Which takes you to the next phase, what I call the rubber hits the road phase. Making your idea real. These initial steps of making your idea real. You're moving your idea from an abstraction to reality. What most people don't understand is that this is hard. What happens, you can see in this phase, your idea is so clear. You can picture the whole, you can picture it. It's super clear. But it's not really clear, and it's not really there. It's really a symbol of your idea. And now you're trying to make it real. Now you're trying to write it down, or you're trying to design it. Suddenly, your idea looks pretty mundane. Kind of lame. You're like, why did I think this idea was so great? This is where the first stage of self-doubt. Oh God, this idea. I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't do it. So what happens here is that the honeymoon is over, and now you're going steady with your idea. And you just found out that your idea has faults. But that's okay. Everyone has faults. It doesn't mean it's a worthless idea. What you have to do here is find your hook. You gotta find your hook, and you gotta take the time to do it. And what's hard about that is that the struggle in this phase is invisible. So I was a designer for many years. I used to share an assistant with other designers, and she would panic for me when a deadline would be looming. Because I take a long time searching for my hook. And she'd be thinking, you don't have anything done. You better get stuff done, Sarah. I'd be like, relax, it's gonna be okay. Because I knew I had to find my hook. When I found my hook, other things were gonna fall into place. But other people I worked with had to produce evidence. So I call it the fascism of evidence. You wanna prove that you're working hard. Somebody comes by, you want them to see that you're suffering and that you're trying to get something done. So this is the rushing to create evidence of your hard work is a mistake, and it's the most common mistake. And if you can hang tough and let this ferment, and if you're in charge of people, when you don't demand that evidence at that early stage, help them, what they need here is their hook. They don't need the finished product yet. It's too soon. And then once you find your hook, you get to keep going. And then you get to make some progress until you hit the third struggle. What I call the messy middle, or losing control. About halfway through, everything starts to get hard again. Everything starts to fall apart. It starts to look like a disaster. It feels out of control. You panic. I've lost control of this project. What's happening here? What am I doing again? Can I really do this? Can we make this happen? It's sort of like your ideas in the 8th grade. You know, its nose is too big for its face. It's got braces. It feels constantly embarrassed. It just doesn't look right. You have to start saying yes. This is where, especially, yes and culture comes into play. You need to start saying yes early and often. So what do I mean by that? I mean you have to start listening very hard to what's in front of you. What are you? You have to ask generous questions. What are you? What do you need from me to succeed? Not what were you? What did I hope you were going to be? You have to let go of your preconceived ideas about your project and accept what it is so you can help it be itself. And you take that leap of faith to see if it will work, not because you know it will work. Who here has been married a long time? Been married a long time. This is the married phase. Oh, yep, love is work. You just gotta hang tough and do it, and it's faith. You're working on faith. If I show up, if I ask generous questions, it'll work out. And then this takes you to the last phase, which I call fine art of finishing. Finishing is hard for a lot of people. When I write about finishing, I get a lot of feedback. And I think this is another place where expectations come into play. Oftentimes, the last 10% of any project can take as long as the first 90. And that feels counterintuitive. You feel like you can see the finish line. Why is this part taking so long? Because all your decision making now is subtle. You've already made the big global decisions. Now it's all small, subtle decisions. It needs patience. Often your project needs space and you need to walk away. But at the same time that you have to walk away, you have to visit early and often. And you need to remember to return without necessarily expecting a solution. But it's the visiting plus time that creates a solution. Finishing is also committing, and a lot of people find that scary. Once it's done, then it can be judged. The other hard thing about finishing is that it's often clear to you that your project is not perfect. And you're very aware of what isn't perfect about this project, and that can be hard. The higher of an achiever you are, the harder you often find this. And I'd like to suggest that perfectionism is the high achiever's expression of shame. Perfectionism is the high achiever's expression of shame. I'm not okay if I'm not perfect. My project's not okay if it's not perfect. Your project's never going to be perfect. You're okay that you're not perfect, and so is your project. But realizing that that is what your perfectionism is doing. A lot of people are very attached to their perfectionism, but really understanding that, at least considering that it's an expression of shame and not being okay, and somehow can give you the room to move forward, regardless of being proud. So these are the 4 stages of the emotional arc. And I believe that understanding this emotional arc helps people take risks to create, because it's a part of creating a yes and culture. Because it's empathetic, and it's respectful of process, and it's respectful of struggle. Now in business, I feel like you have an additional challenge that, for instance, someone in the arts doesn't have, and that's that most of your creativity is collaborating and public. And so people have to struggle in front of people. And they don't like that. Because when you're struggling in a group, you have all your power dynamics happening, and you also have people who, when you're feeling vulnerable, like don't underestimate how vulnerable people feel when they're trying to be creative in a group. That's why it's really important to create a culture that respects the exploration process. If people feel like you don't have to have the answer, you're genuinely exploring, then they'll take more risks. Then, I study improv. And the first thing that you learn when you study improv is that it's paramount to support your team. And so improv is pretty much the purest form of creativity. You make something from nothing on the stage and then it's gone. But if someone goes on the stage and they start doing this, and you don't know what are they doing? They're your teammate. What you're trained to do, you're standing on the side. I don't know what that is. You're trained to go like this with them. Make it bigger. Make it bigger. Commit. Support them. This is antithetical to everything you learned growing up, like surviving high school, like that isn't what happens. But learning that is a powerful team building tool. It's really team building at its finest. And when I first started working at my theater, the coolest, most respected improvisers respected everyone's creativity. There is no snarkiness, there is no eye roll. It creates a culture of respect that trickles down to everyone who joins. If people stay, they adapt. And I say that because the person at the top, when they're committed to innovation, when you're committed to innovation by being committed to process, then more creative ideas are going to flow from your staff. They are. When they don't have to have the perfect answer, they can start to take those risks. And increasing your own awareness of the role that the emotions play in the creative process is a smart way into it. Because you can start to recognize it in yourself, and you can start to recognize it in the people around you, and help them get through it. And then help them recognize that their struggle is in you. And when Woody Allen said that 80% of success is showing up, he wasn't talking about a perfect attendance record. He was talking about engaging in the struggle, showing up and struggling anyway. It's the only way to truly create. So does anyone have any questions? I think you have.
Yeah, I have a few points. I like your presentation here, except the honeymoon phase. I think you have to have a phase in front of it. I think you're leaving out the word imagination. Imagination is the bedrock of society and the entire world.
That's true.
And if you can think about something and you imagine it, then you go through these stages, and then the last stage I put in is selling it, getting it to the rest of the world. You can do it in your own mind, but then you know better than the tree, because you can't do it.
Yeah, and I guess I think of the selling it as sort of part of the finishing. Like if you can't, if you're meeting a deadline and you're getting it out there, and also if you don't have time built in to really let something percolate to the best that it can, I still think revisiting here is good, and because the time element is really important.
But the key to everything you're speaking about is imagination.
That's right. And I guess for me, the imagination part happens in this honeymoon phase. I think a lot of times if a team is brainstorming and coming up with their ideas, and it's that falling in love part that happens in that phase. That's a great point. I mean, imagination is the source of everything.
It isn't mine. I stole it.
Many years ago, in the middle of a project that didn't seem to ever really be coming to fruition, the person that had asked me to do it said something that I didn't really understand, I don't think, until today. And if something is worth doing, it's worth doing wrong.
Yes.
That was the exact words verbatim of what I heard something over 30 years ago, and every once in a while it would occur to me, what the hell did he mean?
Yes, that is what it, yes. That's exactly right. If something is worth doing, it's worth doing wrong. You can't get to right and perfect without being wrong and failing. It's just that most people don't see it.
I would have, first of all, do you think it's the sixth grade teacher that destroyed our culture? That where it starts.
No, I actually.
Or have you studied that, really, in all fairness, if that's what's changing?
I actually don't think it's that particular teacher. I think it's our cultural messaging, like the fact that being creative is for little kids.
Okay.
It's for children. So a fifth grader and a sixth grader is trying to not be one of those anymore.
And I also have a follow-up question regarding the creativity side. I mean, you said that, or lack of creativity. Have you ever studied entrepreneurs versus corporate, as far as the creative
Well, entrepreneurs
style?
definitely seem more creative.
Well, that's my point.
Yes, but I think that sometimes an entrepreneur can not know why they're creative.
Well, necessity.
Well, but they might not know what's going, like what they push through. It's almost like a great athlete is not necessarily the best teacher of how to do something. And so the entrepreneur often is a more creative person, but they could be very frustrated with their staff and have an impatience about what that process is, and for people who it doesn't come naturally to, or who are afraid to struggle.
Or the entrepreneurialism becomes corporatized as you grow.
That's right.
So then,
Becomes a
the
manager.
founder who's a creative genius and does everything this way can't trim the sails to get it to sea.
That's right. And in fact, that's what they say, a lot of times the guy who starts a business is not the one who should be running it.
Right.
You want to switch that, it's a different personality. That's definitely true.
I had one other thought. When you first began your presentation, you talked about creativity doesn't seem to fit in with making money. It was a separation. I think the way to get somebody to think about being creative and making money is to talk about inventing and inventors. And they're the creative ones. They actually go through all of those steps, and they actually make a lot of money if they succeed.
I think that that's true, but I also think that your sales department, your marketing people, the people out in the field have to often be creative about how they deliver that information, coming up with new ways of, like how does maybe creative accounting is a dangerous area, but there's a lot of departments in a business where the creativity is not nearly maximized, and it's almost like people think of it as a design, like it's about designing objects, and I certainly have designed a lot of objects, but when you are trying to come up with an experience for your customer, or I think there's a lot of different ways of, my father, to me, was like one of the most creative football coaches in New Jersey. People hated to play him for that reason. Like, what crazy thing is he gonna do with his little small players that aren't super fast? And he was extremely creative. And in fact, my mother's a fine artist, and I think that in many ways my father was more creative than my mother. She was technically extremely talented, but my father allowed himself to turn something around, to turn something upside down. He was less held back by particular rules or ideas about how something should be. Did you want to say?
Yes, I was going to ask you, have you had any thoughts or got any feedback about the creative process between men and women, as it seems that necessity is the mother of invention?
That's true. So necessity is so you're saying women are maybe more creative?
I'm asking. I mean, I don't think that to be true, actually. I think...
I actually kind of think, I was almost going to say without wanting to create a controversy, that I think some of the reason that creativity goes down in schools is because it's perceived as feminine.
Well, that's where I was leaning.
Yeah.
And feminine is...
Is there something you could do to add to your presentations at any point in time to demonstrate that it really isn't gender related?
It's not, and I also, when I do a workshop for a company or something, we do a collaborative creative project. So, because a lot of times what's difficult in business with the creative collaboration is that other things come up, like a lack of control. You can't control what they're doing. You want to, or there's usually one or two people who want to, or there's power dynamics. Go ahead.
I find very interesting, I think that Henry Ford is the one who destroyed creativity because he had his assembly line. And it's the same thing as the military. They don't want creativity. They want people, and the workforce, for the most part, you don't want your factory with 2,000 people coming up with new ideas how to throw the light switch, and it gets very disruptive. You want to go boom, bada boom, bada boom, and you want the people to do what they want to do. And I just find it very strange because you're talking about actually opening up creativity in people who have already grown up in their world. And I found that not impossible, but pretty damn close, because people feel in their comfort zone, they do what they want to do, and I personally have found it very, very difficult to get people to be creative who aren't creative to begin with. If you've got a creative person to begin with, that's a great thing. But if you have people who are not creative, that's why
Well, I think
people
that
don't do anything.
I think two things about that. One, what can be interesting in a company is that when you do want, just because you don't want people being creative about everything, doesn't mean that creativity is bad. You know, we're not going to be creative with the accounting. That could be dangerous. But when you do want creativity, people might be different leaders. There might be different creative leaders. Like the person who takes the lead might be a different person who can't take the lead in another situation. And I think that's really interesting. And I also think that everyone's creative. How is it that everyone's creative when they're 7? If you ask a room full of 2nd graders who's creative, everyone knows they're creative. So it doesn't. I'm not talking about being artistic.
But just being creative is not the answer. It's creative with a certain purpose. I mean, the kid can be creative drawing 3 heads on a horse, and he draws 3 heads on a horse his whole life, and he's creative in that respect, but that's not going
Well, then he's in a rut, so he's not.
Yeah, no, everybody's in a rut. We're all in ruts. We do what we're comfortable
I have
with.
another question.
But leadership comes out, I think. If somebody's a leader, they will come out. They probably were a leader from before that. That's why the Army has people in the officers training school, as opposed to taking most of them out of the current draft.
Well, that's true, but I'm not saying we should, I think picking the clearest, most concrete example, like the Army, and then showing why people aren't creative. I still think, if you want any kind of change out of people, it's usually, there's resistance. But if you do want change, you have to show them that you want change by respecting it.
How would an entrepreneur that runs an organization anytime, doesn't matter what industry, and say they are creative, how would they be able to, what kind of tactics or what kind of methods could they use to maybe, I'm not saying you have to have others, you have to have people that would join in the creativity, but you'd have to, how would you communicate that to people that work for you or people that work with you, that you get them motivated to get to that level of creativity to help help the company grow?
Well, I think probably to his point, you have to define your problem, and that you're willing to hear other answers. And I also think that you can actually invest in helping people learn about the creative process more. So if you actually do something, let's say you do a workshop, or like one thing about improv is that what you're really learning is listening. Most people have a difficult time listening and actually hearing what is being said, and teaching listening and modeling listening is a challenge. And I actually think having it, setting aside the time, so in the same way you might do professional development, where people are learning more about a particular area at work. They could have professional development about the creative process and honing that creative process and developing it further. And there's different ways you can handle that as a group, or you could reward that on the side if you have a budget for that, and then include that. Like anyone who takes improv, great, I'll pay for that. It changes you. It changes you with that.
Can you teach someone to be creative, especially depending on their personality?
So I think we're all on a spectrum, right? So there's, like, we could pick the most robotic person we know and think to ourselves, he can't be taught. And you know what? Maybe that's true. Maybe he's not going to be super creative, just like I'm not your guy for the math pro. You know, like, okay. But somewhere in there, there's a whole spectrum of people that you can ask them to use their brains more, and you can ask them, but they need to feel like they don't have to provide you with a guaranteed result. And they have to feel safe enough to do it. And they have to feel like they understand what is being asked of them, and then they have that exploration problem. So for instance, you know, and you can learn, like on the intellectual side of the creative process, you can learn the skills. Like one big mistake in brainstorming is that people brainstorm once. So when you brainstorm once, you get all the obvious stuff out, but it's at the third round of brainstorming that you really start to get the interesting ideas. But most people think that's taking too much time, or that it takes that leadership to push that thinking farther. That now, okay, we did that first round, now we're going to do a second round. Even if that doesn't have to happen right at the same time. But then you're pushing it again. And in fact, letting things gestate like that and doing your third round a week or two later, you might actually get some great ideas because people will sleep on it. And people will, because they can't help it. Their dreaming brain, their alpha waves are doing that work. So someone like me, I'm thinking about that all the time, and I'm constantly exercising those other thought processes. I know the germination process, and I'm familiar with it, and I will write it out. And I have faith in it, but a lot of it is my faith in it. You know, it's not so different, like, you know, most of the time we use sports analogies in business, and the big difference to me, like, so, and in sports they do a lot of things, like they use visualization, you know, stuff that can sound kind of hokey, but they know it works, just like I know it works. But the biggest difference between creativity and sports, for instance, is that sports is very concrete. All your goals are extremely concrete, increasing your time, or reducing your body fat, or whatever you're doing. And so it's a little more comfortable. But people can start to understand what's going on in the ambiguity. But really, they're having the programming going on in their head is stopping themselves from getting anywhere.
I think it's really important to note that rather than teaching someone to be creative, one must give people permission to be creative.
That's right. That's wonderfully said.
There's a saying in Chinese, which is, out of chaos comes brilliance. And one must be prepared to look foolish before the light.
That's right.
So your talk today, which thank you very much, was brilliant, reminded me of that as part of the process, that one must have permission to be creative. It must be okay to unleash your creativity. We're all creative.
And it must be okay to look a little foolish.
And you must be prepared to look foolish.
And most adults, that's a very good.
I'm so well practiced at this, as long as we can laugh at ourselves. Yeah, absolutely. And boy, does it really.
And if you have a hierarchy at work, and you have managers, like helping them help people be okay with looking foolish. And they feel like people they represent are representing them, and they want to make sure they get their guaranteed results. You know, that's why, to me, it has to be cultural. Because people do adapt to the culture. People It's not like everyone agrees intellectually on something and then does it. The culture changes and people adapt. I mean, gay marriage is a perfect example of that. The force moved forward and the stragglers have had to sign on. That's what happened in the civil rights movement. They couldn't get all of America to raise their hands and be like, you're right, we're on board. No, they had to make it a law. That's because that's culture. That's changing the top-down message, and then the vast majority just buy in to the dominant culture. They don't create it. And then they can start to be more like that. They can start to tap into their creativity if that's what's expected. So I really appreciate your time.